Okay, I am recording. Right, so we're going to look at, first of all, we're going to look at Trackmattes. And I have a few examples of Trackmattes. And the easiest and most straightforward way to show how a Trackmatte works is to go back into kind of typography and things like that and show you how a Trackmatte can be used to mask a moving object. Now, I'll show you first. So the text is revealed as it moves across the screen. It's just a basic position property change. Text goes left to right. As it goes, it passes through a mask which reveals it. It could just as easily, work in the opposite. If I set the mask to subtract, you get the idea. It's just a mask. But you might notice that the mask is actually in a different place. So what we have here is we have a Trackmatte situation for the specific reason that I can't create this effect by placing the mask directly on the text. Let's just try that for a moment and see how it would work. I'll hide these two and I'll create, sorry, I should have hidden them first. So I'm going to just create a piece of text. I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm going to move it from left to right. So nothing different. Text goes left to right. Now let's say, okay, I put my mask here like I did previously, and great, everything is looking good. I can see my mask is showing my text just as it did previously, but as soon as I move the text, you will notice that the mask moves. This is the nature of masks. Masks are attached to the layer on which an object currently resides. Okay, so we know that we apply masks to layers, but if a layer moves, the mask goes with it. Now, I don't even want to get into what you could try and do by animating the mask. It's just not worth discussing because it's not an option. What we want to do is we want to try and get the mask off the layer that's moving and onto a static layer, and then somehow pass the mask's job or information down back onto the text that we want to be revealed. So I'll delete the mask and I'll show you how we go about doing that. So I am going to need, as I say, another layer that I can apply the mask to, and that layer won't move. You could do this on any kind of layer, it doesn't really matter, but generally speaking, this is where solids come in. You go down, right click, new, solid, and I'm going to call it Trackmatte for text. You don't always have to be quite as literal. You might say matte the text or something, whatever makes sense to you. You click OK, you get a big white solid or whatever color, it doesn't matter. You're not going to see this solid, so it actually literally doesn't matter what color it is, and added to that, you can actually switch it off as soon as you have created it. So the next thing then is we can draw a mask on the solid layer that we've just created. We don't need the layer to be visible for us to draw a mask on it. That's a handy thing because we need to find out where the underlying text is so that we can draw that mask around it. Now, notice how the mask didn't really have any effect on the text. Again, that's because it's on a different layer. So there's no real Trackmatte happening just yet because we need to do one last step. Once we've created our mask on our solid layer, directly above our text layer, we go down to our text layer. We look for something called Trackmatte. If we don't see it, we go to Toggle, Switches and Modes. There it is, TRKMAT for Trackmatte. And we see a drop-down menu there giving us some options. And we have a few options. We have Alpha and Luma. And then we have the inverted version of whatever those choices happen to be. Okay, so if we're working with a mask, then we're not dealing with light and dark. We're not dealing with tone. We're dealing with, alpha. Masked, showing, masked, hiding, and so on. So alpha matte will give us what we need. Okay, now it's coming from the layer directly above, which it actually tells you is called matte the text. So there's two things here. It's telling you what kind of matting you're getting, and where the matting is coming from. Now, in fact, for this to work, the layer that gets the mask placed on it always needs to be one layer directly above the thing that you want to do the masking to. So I click alpha matte, matte the text. Again, nothing seems to happen because the text has not yet moved out of it. So you can see there now, it's a little bit big, so it's kind of hard to see. So I'll just squish that in a bit. And now you should see that the mask on our track matte layer is now doing what we want it to do. Now, there are lots of reasons that you will want to do this, as I say, in a motion design sense or in a compositing sense. And I'm going to actually I'm not going to go through them all now, but we will encounter them, and it will be made clear that, you know, this is a track matte situation. This is a track matte situation. You need track mattes for this, 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 and this. Okay, so that's the idea. That's how you create a track matte. All you need to remember is that the track matte needs to go on a layer directly above. Usually it's a solid, and that layer itself obviously cannot be animated, because then the mask will start moving again. But you're not going to do it because the layer was created solely for the purpose of being a track matte layer. So there should be no cause to animate it. Okay, so that's the fundamentals of a track matte. But you might have noticed we have a few options in there in what we can do with these track mattes. And we can work with alpha or we can work with luma. Now, this gave us an alpha, and we can also, this allowed us to use the alpha of the mask. Now, remember, masks can be, you know, add, subtract. You know, they don't have to, once you've created that mask, you can do whatever the mask usually does. You can feather it, expand it, whatever you want to do. You can feather that and give it a nice little smudged touch. But that's the mask. Okay, so that's using a mask. It's very common, and you're going to be doing this a lot in compositing too. Trust me, you will know all about track mattes. But for now, we're going to move on to another way that you can use these track mattes, and that is using the alpha from something else. So here we have someone who might look a little bit familiar in that we've seen him before from our track the hand exercise. It's this chap, okay? And he has been keyed out using keylight. So this is no different. All I've done is I have used keylight to isolate him, to key him out from the green background. He then has an alpha channel. He has alpha all around him of, you know, 0 or fully transparent, and alpha of 100% or fully opaque inside. Anyway, the bottom line is we now have alpha that we can work with for a track matte. And just going to delete that bottom layer because I don't want it for now. If I go back out into my composition and show you what's going on here, we have our track the hand layer, the guy being keyed out using keylight, and I'll switch this back to no track matte for a minute. There he is. So he's just keyed out, and on the bottom layer then we have the countryside JPEG that we were using in a previous class. Now we can actually use him and his alpha channel as a track matte for the countryside. So because we have alpha to work with here, we can go down to our track matte and say alpha matte. So yes, take alpha information from trackthehand.mov, which is the layer directly above. And when I do that, it takes all of the parts of the image where he's opaque or visible, all of the parts where he's, you know, transparent, and passes that down onto our countryside image. So this is a really nice way of taking transparency from another layer and using it on a different layer again. Okay, and you know, you can put other stuff under him now if you wanted to, and such as, you know, the countryside image we had which I just deleted, which I had under him, and you can see now he is above it. Now, the other thing that's very handy about this, and this is where this sometimes is a better way of working than stencil luma, stencil alpha, is because the track matte layer only ever affects the layer directly beneath it. So you can put stuff beneath that again without worrying about, you know, the effect being carried on all the way down throughout the layers, such as it does with our stencil and silhouette luma and alpha that we did in previous classes. So this is handy when you want to keep everything on the timeline and you don't want to be worrying about pre-comps and stuff like that, then this is the way to go. Okay, and you can see here that we can clearly see our background behind him. He's being matted out by the track to hand. Okay, so no solids or anything like that required. Something popped into my head there now. It's gone again. Okay, I'm sure it'll come back to me. Now, so again, we're doing pretty much the same thing. We're taking the transparency from a layer directly above and we're passing it down. Now, that's what I meant to say there. If you've used clipping masks or clipping paths in Illustrator, this is the same kind of thing. They allow you to kind of create transparency using objects in upper layers as well. Anyway, that's almost by the by. Now, let's try something slightly different. Here we have, again, an image that should look slightly familiar in that we have the outline from our Jane image that has been made into a slightly higher contrast version of itself. There she is. All we have is dark on bright, black for the most part on white. So now when we put that above this object or this layer, we can tell that writing JPEG to take its transparency information from the luma values in Jane's image. So this time what we're doing is it's like a two-step process. We're looking at the top layer and we're saying, okay, we have bright, we have white, we have dark, we have black. Where it's white, make it opaque. Where it's black, make the text transparent. So we're treating this as a matte image where its brightness and darkness is translated into alpha information, which is then sent down to the writing.jpg. Now this kind of slightly different in that if we go down to luma, which is brightness and darkness, and matte it using the luma values, we get a kind of an inside out thing, which is typical, you know, but that's fine because with these you have the option to invert that and switch it around so that we get something a little bit more like we expected. So we could have also inverted Jane's videos, but you know, that would be an unnecessary step when we could have just done it in here while we were doing the track mat. Okay, so that is the basic idea, I suppose, of Trackmattes, and we're looking at it from the three main uses. But really, this is just kind of showing us the underlying principles of how it's working. It's taking transparency from a mask, it's taking transparency from the alpha channel of a green screen video, and it's taking transparency from the luma values of an image. But how you create the transparency and the luminosity and how you use these masks, there's an infinite amount of ways. So this is why I say it's such a big tool, because it allows you to do so many different things based on the use of that and depending on what you need to do. And it is, as I say, very much going to come into its own when you are motion tracking.